Actually, today I'm going to introduce the troublemaker, the thing that makes this communication process a bit tricky, and that is our filters. Our filters are pretty much connected to our personality and our bias and our life. Now, the bottom line is that filters are actually the differences between us. Filters are the things that make us see things differently, hear words differently, perceive actions differently. So where does our filters come from? Well, like I said, filters are a result of everything that we have experienced in our life so far. So they're actually neurologically hardwired into our brain. It's our upbringing, our parents, our friends, our education, our religion, our culture, our traumas or lack of trauma, everything that has molded us into the person we are is also the basis for our filters. Filters in conversations are things or thoughts in our head that can distort or delete or generalize a message on its way from a person to another or from the sender to the receiver. There's nothing wrong with having filters. It's very natural. The problem arises if we don't know that they exist. Because if we are not aware that there is this filter situation going on between us, we're probably going to just assume that the conclusion that automatically comes to our minds or to our heads when we are receiving information, we're probably going to assume that that is a reflection of a truth. And if we assume that the message that we just got is a reflection of a truth, there's no reason why we should check that, right? We just assume that's the way it is. So if we don't check, we're never going to find out whether the other person actually intended something else than we just got. Some of the filters that we have in communication can be your state of mind, your emotional state. It can be the means through which you communicate. Is it telephone? Is it a Zoom call, or some of the filters that we encounter when we're trying to communicate can be distractions. There may be a lot of things going on and we're simply not able to receive all the information that we were supposed to have. It can also be our emotional state. If I'm in a happy place, I'm more likely to interpret things in a positive way than if I'm having a really bad day. Another thing is the relationship that I have with you and my expectations. If I am used to you being negative or critical or in some way not positive, I'm going to assume that the intention behind what you're trying to say to me is something bad, something negative, and I'm going to interpret it as such. While you, on the other hand, might actually intend this to be a compliment or a solution or anything in the positive realm. Another filter can be a difference in style. If you and I have very different styles of being, styles of speaking, styles of whatever, that can be like a disturbance on the communication line between us. Also, filters can be self-protection. If you feel vulnerable or in some situation you don't feel safe and you feel like you need to protect yourself, you might actually just shut off. The problem arises if we don't know that they exist. Because if we don't know that there is a lot going on between us, we're probably going to assume that the conclusion that lands in our head when we get a message is exactly as intended. The moment that becomes a challenge is when we meet other people who have their personality, their experiences, their bias, their everything, and they see the world through the lens of their filters, which means that I'm talking to you about a red balloon, and you in your life have had the experience with a red balloon, but that was a really bad experience. When I speak happily about a red balloon, you are going to perceive that information about the red balloon as something negative. So I'm over here happily talking about something that I think is funny, and you are reacting negatively to what I am saying, and I have no idea why that is, because I'm not inside your head. I give you a piece of information in one way or another, and the value that you give to that information is completely different from the value that I give to that information. So this makes it a little bit trickier to address, but it's not impossible. And what we want to do is make sure that that breach or that gap in the communication process is closed. And the first step to actually doing something about jumping to conclusions based on your filters and not based on an actual processing of information is accepting that they exist and taking a look at exactly what filters you have and how they affect you. And towards the end, in the last lessons of the course, we're going to look into what we can actually do and solutions. And that requires presence, and that requires motivation, and that also requires a little bit of courage, especially if that is something that you're not used to doing. Being direct, being assertive, and being clear might feel a bit daunting, and it might actually feel like something aggressive if you're not used to doing it. But don't worry, that feeling will pass, and the outcome at the other end is going to be so much better.